So we want to start things on a cheery note today, which something you may have seen over the last couple of weeks in the news was a woman in Mexico who was killed while training. She was trying to squat 180 kilos in a Smith machine, and she just got decapitated by it effectively. She had it on her back, sitting, trying to do what looked like a box squat with two spotters that weren't paying attention. And she just gets completely pinned by it, instantly killed. We're not going to show the video because I think out of respect for the dead, and also we don't want to make this into a snuff podcast, but there's a few things that have come about off the back of it, and it's, the full story hasn't been brought to light yet. It's still under investigation.
So we got sent this, I think, didn't we, on Instagram, like saying, "Oh, you guys should react to this." And I was actually with a friend at the time who trains, and I said to him, "Oh, like, look at what's happened." And we spent because in the link that we were sent, there wasn't the video, there wasn't really any detail. It was just that this lady had been killed by 400 pounds, I think they said, which is what, like 182.5 or something like that. Is that right?
Yeah.
And we were discussing, like, is that... So I think the first thing that comes to mind for anybody who's lifted weights before is, how does that happen? The second thing is, like, was it an ego lift that went wrong, or was it someone like really experienced? I think this is what I'd assumed it was someone who, because you've seen clips, you've probably seen the clips at like IPF Worlds and stuff like that, where someone unracks a weight that's too heavy for them, or it's like a PB attempt and they get like knocked forward, or they try to rack it and they can't, or something like that.
You're right that there's a difference. You can tell someone who is an experienced weightlifter or someone who's handling a weight that is within the realm of what they can do. And they handle it differently to what this looked like. This, to me, looked like a breach of trust from somebody, to be honest, because her and the two spotters didn't really look like they knew what they were doing or were paying attention. It's hard to know. Like, she wasn't filming it, so it wasn't like it was some kind of stunt for social media. But somebody should have said something at that point.
Yeah. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Like, if you've probably seen it, like someone in the gym load up a bar that you look at them and think, they can't do that. Like, would you intervene?
If I genuinely thought someone was going to be in danger from something, I'd make sure that I was unoccupied and be nearby, so that if they did pin themselves, you could go over and help.
I think in this instance, though, to be honest, from what I've seen of the video, I don't think there's much you could have done.
So the side spotter, it's difficult because it actually squatting in a Smith machine with a weight that's far too much for you with a
Fixed
bench.
plane, isn't it?
Yeah, fixed plane. It's a guillotine. That's it. Like you're stuck.
Oh,
and
you'd think of it like that.
And she, once it starts falling, you can't hook it back into the clips quick enough. You're then pinned between that and the bench. So the first line of defense is don't attempt something that is way outside of your max. But again, I don't think this was necessarily a lack of judgment on her part. Yes, that was one of the problems. But in medical error in hospitals, they call it the Swiss cheese model, which is the nurse left the drug cupboard unlocked. The doctor wrote in squiggly handwriting on the prescription chart. The patient wasn't being attended to. And it's like all of these things happen in sequence, which then causes some kind of error or fatality. So it's not one particular thing. It's like multiple holes in the Swiss cheese that line up and create a hole all the way through.
Got it. Right.
So in this case, lack of judgment from the spotters, breach of trust from whoever was training her or whoever encouraged her to do that. And it could have been prevented, if the side spotter had tried to catch it, but he was looking the other way from the video. And then when they did go and try and help her, like, people kind of hesitated as to whether to try and pick it up off her. As you say, though, probably too late by that point anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I've never really thought about it before, but I suppose a Smith machine in many ways is way less safe than a barbell, because especially squatting, because if you fail with a squat, like you fall forward or you fall backwards, and the bar goes with you. So like if you're in a power rack, the bar will fall with you, and you could. I mean, we've seen it at competitions, right? Like people actually get out from under the weight of a barbell, which it doesn't exactly look comfortable, but at least the bar is not in a fixed plane with you in between it and the floor. The bar can fall in any direction. It can pivot, rotate, spin, dump forward, dump backwards, and you can let go of it as well without you feeling sort of stapled. And then add to that, in this instance, there was a bench that she was over, because as you say, it was a box squat or something like that. And there was loads of instances. I remember when box squats were really heavily popularized because of West Side, lots of people did box squats, and then you squat to a box, even in a power rack, and then if you fail, what do you do?
You're just pinned.
You're just pinned. Yeah,
horrible.
You've got like your spine, and then load and a fixed thing that's going to take that load plus whatever else.
Disgusting. It's just asking for a stress fracture, isn't it? So
yeah,
or a compression fracture. So this is part of the problem, that if it was a free barbell, not that we'd recommend just loading up a bar and unracking it for giggles, but there's a distance between the bar and the plate, and so there's no bench. Even if it falls in the worst position, like on the back of your neck, you're not going to get decapitated by it because there's a gap for your head to slip out of it.
Yep.
So yeah, and as we've seen people at competition. I remember a guy at nationals who unracked 200 kilos. He did the squat, and then as he was coming up, he decided to bail out and rolled it forward over his neck, so over the back of his neck. He fell over, was in tears, understandably, and then reattempted the same weight and did the same thing again. And then on the third time, people were like, please, if you're going to fail it, don't roll it over the front of your head, or over the back of your head. Just let the spotters handle it.
It's that that's a common one, and letting go of the bar, completely letting go.
Just, nope, don't want it.
Yeah, because it's like this like deep primal thing, isn't it? Like you're not thinking clearly at that point. You're just like, oh my God, I need to get out from underneath this. But the very sad thing is that she probably wouldn't have been able to walk 400 pounds out of a squat rack if it had been a free barbell. Like I think the limiting factor would have been actually getting it away from the safeties. Never, like, whereas obviously with a Smith machine, all you need to do is like move it up slightly and twist, and then that weight is free to do anything within that plane up and down. Whereas obviously a barbell and a squat rack, it's normally on a J hook, so you got to get it out from the J hook and then walk it back far enough away from the squat rack, depending on what you're squatting in, for it to then arguably be like really dangerous. And even then, falling forward, you're going to fall, assuming you're squatting somewhere safely, you're going to fall into a rack, aren't you? You're going to fall into a power rack or against some safeties or some pins. And falling backwards is still horrendous, but less severe. Like you're not going to get pinned, you're just going to fall onto the bar.
I think the moral of that story is only attempt a weight that you can safely fail. And actually, we recommend to all of our clients that they, especially when they're learning the technique with the squat or with any barbell movement, to deliberately fail it a couple of times with the empty bar, just so that you can get used to what to do if you can't make the weight. So how to dump a bar behind you safely, or how to drop it without being pulled along with it. I've almost passed out doing front squats before, because obviously you've got it compressing your carotids. And as I was coming up, I felt myself losing consciousness. You see the curtain come down over the top. And I tried to hook it in the rack, couldn't make it in the other one, attempted a couple of times, and then kind of slumped over the bar forwards. But that was in a squat rack. And a lot of people try and do stuff for, I don't know if it's for bravado or just thinking like, this will be fine. But like, remember, weights are heavy. Like that's their
only reason for existing.
It's exactly, that's why they exist. And I was worried when this story hit the news that it would be bad PR for weightlifting overall, because people would then, but I think people have taken it quite reasonably, in that, understandably, the whole point of lifting weights is progressive overload, and you need to respect the weight. So
It's exactly the sort of thing, isn't it, where like you have to then deal with your parents and your friends and people who don't lift telling you, I mean, do any of us lift is the question, but that's for a separate episode. The you know, them telling you like, oh, you see, weights are dangerous, you shouldn't be doing that, especially if you're in a strength sport where like you are pushing your 1RM all the time. Because obviously that danger exists, right? Like I think we both, throughout the course of us lifting, we've probably both seen some pretty horrendous videos of stuff happening during. It was always during a squat, I think. Like, do you remember the Brandon Lilly video? Do you remember that? Where he split his kneecap.
Oh God, yeah.
He was walking out a squat with knee wraps on, I believe, and just sort of lost his footing, to step like slightly on the side of his foot, and his knee caved in. And you see stuff like that, and you have to just put it to the back of your mind. But it is obviously part of the process, and I think it is easy to, even with tons of experience, like thousands of reps, you have one instance where you lose your concentration or you're not paying attention, and it's always during like a warm up or when you're chatting with someone, and you take a wrong footing or misload one side of the bar, and you unrack something that's 20 kilos heavier on one side or something like that, and before you know it, you've hurt your hip, you've hurt your back. It's really easy to do. So it's obviously incredibly sad, but like a nice reminder, I think.
Because a lot of that is, in theory, injuries from weightlifting are avoidable. The injuries that typically come about from weightlifting are repetitive strain type injuries from attrition of your elbows. You've given your elbows too much jip over several years and they start to get angry or whatever. But these kind of freak events shouldn't really happen. They tend to happen more with people like
Brandon Lilly.
With people like Brandon Lilly, where they are pushing the limits of how much weight a human can lift.
An assisted human as well. Like even taking steroids out of it, like he's still wearing knee wraps. He's still, I think he was raw rather than in like a single ply suit. But yeah, it's
like you're wrapping fabric tightly on and heavy elastic and stuff on yourself so that you can lift more weight, and then you're taking drugs to make yourself lift even more.
Yeah,
a human's
something's eventually going to give, isn't it?
Yeah,
the equipment or the bar, I suppose. But yeah,
so there we go.